To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Is it just me, or does that lead in look more fiery every single week? I don't know if they're adding just a little bit of flame to it every week or what. Before long, I'll come on and I'll be on fire. It'll be a show. Hi, this is Talkin' Shop, which is a super informative show, which will point you to creators that have things coming out soon. Except for this week, we're going to have an entire hour talking to a titan of the industry, which I'm so excited to do because he's been a part of the experience since the very beginning, but I've never got to sit down and talk to him. So everybody, please welcome to the experience Talking Shop, Dan Wickline.
How you doing?
I'm doing so well, except for this cold sore.
You have got so much a better opening than I do. You got that big rock theme. You got the big fire. Mine's you know.
But I like yours. I guess maybe if it's not your show, you like the other shows better. Kind of like I like straight hair because I have curly hair.
Yeah, the grass is always greener. Yeah.
So I didn't pick the music. That was I think it was a production team decision. But the fun fact that a lot of people don't know, that exploding microphone bit was all created by my son, because he has a passion for 3D animation. So he just made that on his own.
It's a good job.
Yeah, he's like most kids of his generation, right? So he's 18. And most everything that I see him get interested in, he's learning now from just like watching the internet, which is kind of what we're going for, right? Because I try to explain to people what your skill set is, which are so many of them. But one of them that I appreciate a lot is that you have the ability to take a subject and explain it in a way that when you're done listening to one of your shows, you feel like you fully have a grasp of the character or characters and how they fit into the greater universe. And what do you do to prepare? Do you just like know it from reading, or do you go do lots of research?
It's kind of a mix of both. I mean, I've read, I know like Marvel and DC really well, but I will go out and, scour the internet to kind of fill in the blanks, and then I'll sit down and I'll write up, my script for the day just to cover that topic. But again, a lot of it does come from having just read a ton of comics growing up. I started reading when I was 5. I got my first Captain America comic when I was 5 years old. And, the trip down to 7-Eleven to hit the spinner rack was the weekly thing for me, and been doing it ever since, Was
that an encouragement from your parents, or was that just something you found on your own?
My Uncle Dave, actually, it's funny. Dave would always come. He lived in Colorado. He would come visit, and he'd always bring a gift. And it was, when I was younger, it was like a Playmobil set, or some toy. And then he was coming in for just a quick trip, but he wanted to have something. So he stopped at 7-Eleven on the way over, picked up a comic book for me and one for my brother. And that was the gift when he got there. My brother never read the comic he had. I think it was a Nick Fury comic, so I ended up with both of them. But I remember the Captain America one clearly. It was a Frank Robbins artwork, and I was just amazed by it. Like, I don't even know, how does this stuff work or exist? And I was hooked. So, between that and then finding Star Wars 2 years later, I was down this path forever.
I completely understand this. The getting into something because you were interested in reading it or watching it like draws you in so much. I think a lot of people that are part of our industry now ended up there that way instead of just the accidental I write things and someone asked me to write a comic book, so here I am. So I don't meet any of those people, at least.
I know one person. When I was interviewing people before I worked at Bleeding Cool, I had my own little website called Comic World News, and I interviewed Brian Holguin, who co-creator of Aria with Brian Haberlin and stuff like that. And I asked him how he had gotten into comics, and he had already been working for Rolling Stone doing interviews and stuff. He had interviewed Ronald Reagan one time. And he was just wanted something different to do. Found out that Top Cow was like across the street from where he worked. Walked in there and went, "Hey, do you guys need any writers?" And it just happened to be at that point they needed somebody, and he got hired. And I told him, "Don't ever tell anybody that story."
No. I just needed a paycheck.
Yeah. I was bored. I went over to this company and said, "Hey, do you need anybody?"
And everyone else is like doing the real day-to-day struggle and have asked every publisher a million times if they could get a job.
Yeah. But Matt Hawkins, who runs Top Cow, his story is kind of similar. He's a physicist. He's got like degrees and stuff. And he was he went to a signing for Rob Liefeld. And the guy in front of him showed his art portfolio and got work. And Matt's like, "Oh, wait, this is kind of cool." So when he got up there, he goes, "I don't draw or anything, but, I could do anything you need. Do you need like a promotional guy?" Stuff like he ended up getting hired just because he BS'd his way into an office job with Rob.
I love the stories that come out of our industry because it honestly isn't that old of an industry when you think about it in relationship to other industries that exist out there. It's pretty young. I would say a couple generations, and that's it.
Oh yeah. Well, I think every time somebody finds a unique door into the industry, they like close it and seal it on the way out. It's like, nope, no one else is coming this way.
Because we hear stories all the time about people starting out like in the mailroom at Marvel and ending up being an editor. How does that happen?
Oh, I know. Well, wasn't Peter David in the advertising department before he jumped over? It's like, how do you make the jump? How do you even get their attention?
Yeah. So how did you do it? So you worked for a lot of different companies for a long time, and you're very successful doing it. What was the secret?
For me, it was more of a traditional way. I always looked at the industry as a ladder. You got to kind of work your way up. And I got together with a bunch of people from a local comic shop. We did our own ash can back in 1995. Well, was it 94? We did the ash can. And then we're like, okay, well, let's put out our own book. I went through the whole route of being a self-publisher in the 90s. Put out a handful of books in the 90s, learned everything from, how to deal with diamond to coloring, lettering, inking. I have done everything in comics except for actually draw the main characters. I've drawn background art and stuff. And,
oh, wow.
Like I said, I've colored comics. I've done layouts for covers. There's a couple Zenoscope covers that, for the Sinbad series, that I literally did the rough and then the artist drew from there. And I don't consider myself an artist at all. So
what was the self-published book back in the 90s?
We did a couple of them. The very first thing I put out was called Creepers, which was, it was kind of a sci-fi Predator type story. And the idea was just to introduce a bunch of characters that we wanted to do more with.
Mhm.
And then after that, we did a vampire story called Bloodlust, which I think every writer has a vampire story called Bloodlust. And a superhero story called Force. And we were published under the headline Hardline Studios. So there's just a hand.
Did you
I think
do
we
like
got
a
like
proper print run, or did you do like people like me did back in the day? You do a real good FedEx run first.
Oh no, we went through actually Quibicor. We did 4,000 or 5,000 print runs, stuff like that. They didn't sell that well. I have boxes in my garage. If anybody wants some, I can hook you up.
Sounds familiar. We need to do a show where we all just pull out our very early work from our garages. That would be a really fun show.
It would be a lot of fun. I think currently they're in a storage unit in the middle of the desert right now.
Oh wow. Hey JD, how are you doing?
Hey JD.
Okay, so you did your self-publishing. Did I hear you correctly? You said you were doing it out of a comic book shop?
Well, it was just everybody who was involved met through a comic shop.
Mm-hmm.
So, and which is a great way to meet artists and writers and stuff, because everybody wants to be able to write a comic. Being a comic writer it's not really that hard to say you're a comic writer, or be a good comic writer. That's a completely different story. But just to write a comic, it's something you can easily get into or say that you are. But you can find artists and writers at comic shops all the time. The ones that want to break in, because they're going to buy their comics too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really happy now. I think people have realized that we're very friendly to new creators, because that's how I started too.
Yeah.
And they started to connect with us and be like, how can we come and sign at your store? I'm like, just tell me the date you want to come. And then you could tell they're like really timid about it. They're like, well, how does it work? I'm like, you come and you sit at a chair where I have got a cool space set up for you, and you interact with my customers. You sell your stuff to them, and you keep the money and dance a jig. And they're like, you can see their mind explode. Really?
Yeah, I know most comic shops love to have creators because it's something to draw more people in, and it works both ways. You're introducing new readers to this book, but you're also, that person's audience is now finding a new store. So it works really well both ways.
And you just never ever know when that person is going to be the next big person.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You just don't know who's going to take off and who's not. I mean, I remember I'd been working in the industry for a little while, and this guy came to me and was asking me just a ton of questions. I ended up going to lunch with him, sitting down and he just picked my brain for like an hour or so. And hello. And then he just took, and it was Joshua Filkov.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, and this was back when he was doing his little horse and buggy productions, and it was just starting off, and just asked me just a ton of questions. And now he's off writing television and all this other stuff. Now it's like, yeah, good for you.
What is the reluctance do they expect to pay? I think that they do. I think that they believe that there's going to be cost to them. But I know that when you're brand new to making comic books, you probably don't have any profit margin in your books at all. So I don't want to take that from them. I want them to be able to make enough money from their dream to be able to make more dream happen. So, and it doesn't really cost me anything. People aren't going to make a choice between buying their Batman book for the week, for example, and their book. They're just going to also buy their book. So.
Yep. Oh yeah, you can always get someone to try one extra book,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so tell me about Moonstone, because that's a publisher that I like their things, but to me, they don't occupy very much of the shelf, and they don't put out things very often. So tell me about that publishing company, because they're very specific in what they publish.
Yeah, Moonstone is just, it's probably best described as a boutique publisher. They love doing pulp stuff. And, they get access to some of these characters that, even, I mean, they're a little further back than what I would that like beyond what I grew up with. But my dad was always interested in them. So I got interested in them. If you listen to like old radio programs, I have satellite radio, and I'm constantly listening to the old radio programs. So Moonstone is like right up my alley. The company is run by a gentleman named Joe Gentile and his sister Lori, and they're just very nice. I was at a San Diego con with them. Well, I knew Joe, and I kind of introduced it. We were at a group, and I introduced him to a bunch of people that I knew. And in doing so, kind of, he and I became friends as well. So when he started doing some of these titles, like, The Phantom or Green Hornet or The Avenger, these great old pulp characters, I'm like, sign me up. I'm in. And I hadn't done any prose writing at that point, so it was kind of a neat thing to jump into and try my hand at. But also, my dad grew up, he's from Chicago, which I don't know how many people know this, but both the Lone Ranger and Green Hornet were created by a radio station in Chicago.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah. They were created by the same company. They created the Lone Ranger. It became a hit. So they took that same formula and said, okay, well, let's do it a little further in time, or a more modern day story. And the Green Hornet is supposed to be the distant nephew of the Lone Ranger. Yeah.
My mind is exploding right now.
Yeah.
So they started out just as like a radio play?
Uh-huh. So if you grew up in Chicago in the 30s and the 40s, you listened to the Green Hornet and you listened to the Lone Ranger on the radio, and they grew out of there. I mean, they got bigger and bigger, of course. Mm-hmm. But my dad, born in 1937, 35, and he listened to it. So when Joe was, talking about the next book, when it got to the Green Hornet, I'm like, yes, I don't care what you can pay me in copies on this one. I'm fine with that. I want to do a story. And what I did was I worked my dad in as a character into this Green Hornet story. And then I got asked to do a second one in a different novel, and I was able to bring my dad's character back. So my dad is now a recurring character in the Green Hornet universe, and that is probably the best thing I have done as a writer at this point.
So what's the character's name if someone wanted to hunt it down?
His name is Eugene Pops Roberts. Eugene is my dad's name, and we always called him Pops. And Robert is actually my dad's brother. And I didn't want to use my last name, so I used my grandfather, or my uncle. I call him my grandfather. Really odd side note. My dad's brother married my mom's mother. So my uncle is also my grandfather.
I think that somewhere in my family tree, we've got one of those interesting things that's happened. Like someone's spouse died, and then they married, the brother married them. Well,
this was a case where my grandparents met and got married, and then introduced my dad, who was only 7 years older than my mom, met and started dating. And 7 years when you're older doesn't matter that much. When you're 20, 7 years is huge. But yeah, so yeah, I put the character in, and he's a big role in the first story. Actually rescues the Green Hornet, but in the second story, he's more of a smaller character. But I got to bring him back at least.
What a fun thing! So which was the first company you worked with outside of your own published work?
It's funny because the first I worked with and the first that I got published by are two different companies.
Oh.
William Christensen over at Avatar started giving me work, and I wrote just a ton of inventory stories for him. Mm-hmm. But they were all sitting in a file. And then a friend of mine named Paul Benjamin, who worked with me when I was doing Hardline Studios, he ended up working for Humanoids. And I wrote a couple stories for Metal Hurlant when they started doing the Metal Hurlant book here in the U.S. So the first published work are 2 stories for Metal Hurlant Chronicles, and then the stuff from Avatar started coming out as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very cool.
What's the name?
So, okay, so Avatar first, and then did Zenescope come in, or Image?
Zenescope, well, it kind of bounced around. Image came in because I became friends with Steve Niles, and there was a Steve Niles message board off his website, which again shows you nowadays nobody has message boards, but Steve had this. There you go. And that message board was hopping. We had Ben Templesmith, Nat Jones, Jay Photos, Liam Sharp was on there.
Oh, wow.
Ben Mears, who now does a bunch of writing for Clive Barker. I mean, we just had this huge group. Dan Taylor, who went on to be an editor at IDW. Chris Ryle, who was the editor-in-chief at IDW. We were all on this message board talking away. Simon Kodransky, a lot of the artists that Steve ended up using. Milks, it was this great community, and we all got to know each other. And Steve was at a point where after 30 Days a Night where he was just getting tons and tons of work, but could not possibly do all the work that he got. So I started co-writing with him, and we did some Image books together. We did some IDW books together. I co-wrote a couple 30 Days a Night series with him. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, Ben Templesmith and I became friends through Instant Messenger, a lot of stuff through Instant Messenger and message boards. Yeah. Again. And Ben got a hold of me one night and said, I'm really tired of drawing vampires. Can you write me a story about guys in suits with samurai swords?
Oh, okay.
And I said, okay, well, what do you want it to be about? He goes, I already said, guys in suits with samurai swords. And I wrote up an idea called Bloodstained Sword. I sent it to him, and he was like, perfect, we'll go with it. And I'm like, okay. And then I forgot about it. And then a few months later, I'm at San Diego Comic-Con, and this is preview night before it opened, where I'm walking around, and I see Ben. I'm talking to him for a few minutes. And Ted Adams looks over and goes, hey, you want to do that Bloodstained Sword book with Dan next? And Ben's like, yeah. And you're like, okay. I'm like, wait, what just happened?
You just got hired, brother.
Yeah. He's like, our book is getting published. I'm like, great. What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the how things happen like that is always so cool. But walk people through what it looks like to know it's actually official. Are there contracts that get signed before you guys start working on this stuff, or are there not? Do people just make stuff, and if they like it, they actually do it, or no?
It really depends on how you're approaching it. It's something like, Bloodstained Sword, once we got it rolling, then contracts show up and you sign things, and it's, well, they're going to take this percentage, you're going to get this percentage. If there's going to shop it around as a movie, who's going to do the shopping? All of that stuff comes into play when you're doing a book like that.
Right.
If you're doing something for work for hire for a company, that's completely different. Normally an editor calls you up and goes, hey, I need this book done in this amount of time. Can you do it? Great. Okay, I've just emailed you the work for hire agreement. Sign it, send it back, and then you get going.
Yeah, that's nice, easy, fast.
Yeah. And I've done plenty of both of those, whether it's a book of my own creation, like The Freeze over at Top Cow. That's one of them that, I had the idea and they found me the artist, and they actually paid the artist, which was nice. And then it got, moving along, where something else like, I did the book Savage with Shadowline, and that was me coming in to serve a role of scripting. They already had the plot from Steve Niles and Jeff Frank. They had Mike Mayhew on there as artist. All they wanted to do was take the loose plots and turn them into scripts. It's like, yep, I can do that.
So do you have a preference for what you do on books, or is it just fun to jump around to different roles?
I actually like jumping around. I like writing both different genres, and I like coming in, whether it's, Zenoscope. A lot of the stuff from Zenoscope, it's kind of guided by Joe Bruscia and Ralph Tedesco. They kind of have an overall story. So when they bring someone in to write, they go, okay, it's almost like the old Stan Lee process. He gives you about a paragraph, says, this is kind of what I want this episode to be. And then you sit down, you write out a full 22-page script.
Sure.
They approve it and you pass it on. And there's something nice about that. I can usually turn one of those around in 4 to 8 hours. It's just, you're done, you get paid, it's good to go. Mm-hmm. But other times, like the other book I did for the big book I did for Zenoscope was Sinbad, where that was my ideas, and they basically said, well, we want a Sinbad who's kind of a cross between James Bond and Captain Jack Sparrow. And I said, A, that's not possible, but B, here, this is my idea. And, and then I wrote out like a 24-issue outline and just, ran that way. So it's all fun. It's all creative. So the short jobs are fun because it's just diving in and diving out of a story. But the bigger ones that you can really get into are really the bread and butter, Oh,
yeah. I think the only person that I see their name on more Zenoscope books than yours is Pat Shand, which I think he's really 5 people, because I think they're on almost all of them.
Yeah. When I got into Zenoscope, Raven Gregory was doing a lot of the books, and then Pat Shand came in, and he kind of stepped in between all the writers and Joe and Ralph, and became kind of the pseudo editor.
Okay.
For a while, and kind of guided the stories in different places, and then he stepped out, and now Dave Franchini is kind of doing that part. But they always, they're very much they have an idea for what they want to do overall. Mm-hmm. So it's very controlled from top down, where most of the other companies I work with, they're like, yeah, can you put a book out here? We got this slot. Can you put a book in it, please?
Okay, so for when you are in control of your own writing work, this is your creative work. Do you have like kind of a theme or a touchstone that you find yourself going back to, or a cool plot device that you like?
The things that I always try to put into my stories, I always want there to be a mystery. I want something that people have to follow along and figure out, I want something to move the plot along. So a mystery deep down, I consider myself a mystery writer, whether it's horror or whatever genre it is. There should be something that people are trying to figure out. Where the other things I try to do is ground everything in as much reality as possible, as much real world. That way, any of the fantastical items that show up will then seem more realistic because everything else in the world is real. So I'll put in references or, references to real things, real buildings, real streets, talk about movies, or little sub conversations about Lord of the Rings, or just whatever it is. It's something to ground it in things we know, in things that are common, so that everything else that's out there on the far extremes don't seem as extreme.
That makes sense. Have you ever made a gaffe, like put something in a book that you found out later on, or someone pointed out to you that that's inconsistent with real life?
I think I don't remember if I ended up using it or not, but there is this myth that we only use 10% of our brain, and that is a pretty common belief, and it's not true. Yeah. It's just one of those things that gets out there and people believe. And I believe I used that in, years ago. I did a book called I Am Spartacus for a small publisher named Cellar Door, and it was it was a graphic novel that I did, and part of the concept was this guy tapped into the rest of his brain, and started using abilities that we all have, just don't access.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like nope, that doesn't work when you realize no, we do use all of our brain.
It felt really bad, but and I'm not gonna be able to remember right now who did it, but someone took over Scarlet Spider for a while, and they launched it so that he was a superhero for Houston, which was like, yay, we have a superhero. And then they made it clear that they were going to have him swing all over the place. And I was like, this is somebody who's never been to Houston. He's never leaving downtown. There's nowhere else to swing. All crime happens in downtown Houston.
Yep. Yeah, he's like swinging 3 blocks that way and about 4 blocks that way, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there's lots of crime down there, I guess. So that would work out.
He has a fleet of drones that just fly around ready for webs to attach to them. And then,
Now that would have worked. That would have been amazing. But I felt bad though, because I think it meant that the book wasn't a very long-lived book, not because it wasn't good, but I think because people kept on harassing him because he like show a sunny day and like we don't have those.
Oh yeah, you gotta know the city that you're writing about. I've written about if I'm writing about New York, I will research the hell out of every part of New York and the streets and stuff like that before I put anything in it. Or, if it's in Seattle or whatever, you got to know what you're writing about.
You just Google away.
Oh yeah.
Wikipedia.
Google away, talk to people who live there. Yeah. That's the nice thing about the internet is you can usually find somebody from an area and ask questions if you can't find, the actual, the information.
What does JD put up here? Says motorcycle's a superpower in LA. Watch as he gets from Sherman Oaks to downtown in 15 minutes. Yeah. And they get their own lane, which magically appears between 2 actual lanes.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, what I love is taking real events like that. It's like the freeze is, taking, it's all set in downtown LA, and then I move it outside of LA to like Eagle Rock and different areas in Pasadena. And again, I will use real landmarks and stuff like that. But the more you ground those things, the better. But if you do something wrong like that, you're going to lose your readers. I did a foreword for a vampire novel that talked about Disneyland and described how these people got into Disneyland. And at the time I was living about 1.5 miles from Disneyland. And as I'm reading this book and I'm like, this is completely wrong. Everything about this is wrong.
It'll do what you don't want to have happen. You don't want to take people back out of the story. It's just like at the movie theater when there's distracting noises or sounds, and you're like, well, now I'm not in the movie anymore. It messes it up for you.
Oh yeah, and when people defend it, like, well, that makes this sense, and they explain it, doesn't help because you've already been taken out of the show. There's a big controversy right now about Book of Boba Fett, and there's these the term I heard for them were the Mos Espa Vespas. These four colorful speeder bikes that look like they're right out of the Quadrophenia movie. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you see them, it takes you out of the show because you're like, they don't look like they belong on a desert planet, that they would last 5 minutes in that condition with all the sand and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, George Lucas was a big fan of all of these, the 50s thing. He did American Graffiti, and this is the type of stuff they have on Coruscant. It's like, okay, if you have to explain all that, you're already out of the story.
Yeah. JD says that 555 telephone numbers do that for them, that it takes them out of the, like this, well, now I can't call that phone number.
Yeah. I just, if I have to put a phone number in a story, I pick some place that won't mind getting a lot of calls. One of my favorites is when I was growing up, back now that they're gone, But the Toys R Us, the closest Toys R Us, I knew the phone number by heart because I would be calling all the time going, have you got Chewbacca in? Did he come in this shipment? No. Okay, yeah. And it was 331-3215 is the phone number for the Toys R Us in West Covina, California. Now, it's not there anymore, but it was that number for years. And anytime I needed a phone number, you could put a phone number like that in there because then somebody calls up, hello, Toys R Us. They're not going to care, you know?
Yeah, they're so happy.
Yeah. So just pick a fun number, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or They Might Be Giants, the band, has a number you can call with an answering machine, and it just plays their music. They change it up every once in a while. Put that number in there. So if somebody is actually smart ass enough to call, they're going to hear some good music.
Every once in a while, there are very creative publishers that do fun stuff like that. Like Valiant did for the release of, I can't remember which one it was, but it was you could call a phone number and it would assign you, like ask you if you wanted to join this organization that was part of the book. And it sounded like the real deal, Holyfield. I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah. See, that's the fun stuff you can do. It's like license plate numbers. You can always have fun with the license plate numbers, put messages in them. Yeah.
Oh, I always expect that there is one there. Sometimes I feel bad when I can't figure it out.
That or band T-shirts. You just make up band names that you think are funny, and you put them on T-shirts in there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My poor artists, they always get strange notes like, "What? Wait, why is there a band called Sick Dogs Backwash? That's horrible." Yeah.
That sounds like a band that would exist, honestly.
Yeah, that's definitely a punk band. Yeah.
100%. Okay, let's talk about Freeze a little bit because I think I'm remembering this book correctly, in that everything froze, but one fellow had the power to unfreeze things by touching them, right?
Yeah, all the people on Earth froze in place except for one guy. And if he made skin-to-skin contact with somebody, it would bring them out of the frozen, you know. And it was I labeled it kind of a post-apocalyptic story without the apocalypse.
Right.
You know, there's no zombies, there's no nuclear fallout. It's just this event happens, and part of it is trying to figure out the event, but the other part is watching the small group of people rebuild society. And really, you know, no matter how much research you do, how much you look on the web to see about somebody, you're not really going to know who they are. And you get some crazies, you know.
Yeah.
You find out some of the
so much because it was just basically a showing of people's personalities and truly what you're saying, like you never really know somebody, and the kind of like implications of having godlike power, which is what he had essentially.
Yeah.
And what do you get if you have an imperfect God choosing imperfect people, and you get imperfect everything? That's just the way it works out. So
yeah, and the fact that the main character wanted nothing to do with any of this. He didn't want the power. He's never been that kind of person. He's just an everyman. I liken him to kind of how Jimmy Stewart used to play characters. He's just the everyman, you know?
Yeah.
And they didn't have greed. He didn't have the desire to control everybody. He just wanted the world to go back to the way it was. Yeah. And it was a fun book to write. I'm still hoping to get to do more. It really comes down to, at some point, if Top Cow goes, hey, we sold enough of these, let's do some more.
Yeah.
So
I think it's worth exploring because it has lots of possibilities. Because there's no way he could go and actually touch everybody.
Yeah. And if it doesn't get back to continuing in comics, I may end up just doing novelizations of it. So I plan on continuing that story because I think there's a lot of potential on what to do. Plus, I know what the overall arc is, but as I started writing it, there was so many little subplots and places I could go with it. It's like I really just want to play in this universe more.
Oh my gosh, JD. He says he would inform the staff of Outback Steakhouse first. I'm your god. Make me cheese fries. Really gonna choose cheese fries, not the bloomin'
onion. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, daily a new bloomin' onion every day. That's a godlike request, you know. Right. Cheese fries.
You don't even know if they made cheese fries.
I know.
It would just be like more beef. Throw more cow at me.
That's right. Every once in a while, a lobster tail could come along with it. That's fine, but yeah, mainly beef.
Okay, so let's play this weird game.
All right.
Freeze actually happens. You're the main character. Who's the first person you want to freeze?
My best friend, Lisa. Absolutely.
You got to have someone to talk to. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. And I've known her 35 years. She has been my cohort in just about most of my adventures in life. So that would be the first person.
So you have like a personal relationship thing to yours. Mine was like full stop. The person who's in charge of keeping electricity going.
Oh, that would happen soon. And that actually happens in the book too. I mean, they start figuring out those things, but it's kind of like people ask that question, you know, you get stranded on a deserted island. You can take one book with you. What is it? How to build a boat.
That's no fun and way too practical. You're like those people that say, I'm going to get more wishes.
Yeah, I am.
Or figure out a way to cheat their way into more wishes, which is more fun, actually.
Yep.
So how did you end up working with Dynamite?
You want the real story?
I want the real story.
I'm better at poker than Nick Barucci.
I love it.
I met Nick at Wizard World Long Beach, back when there was a Wizard World Long Beach. They had a poker game. I think Scott Dunbeer was the one that put the poker game together. And we had this, it was a charity thing where we all put in, you know, part of the money we put in was that. And Nick was playing, Gareb Shamus was playing, a bunch of creators and stuff were playing. And Robbie Robbins from IDW got me in. I had dinner with IDW that night, and Robbie's like, come on, I'm going. And I'm like, okay. And got in and just started playing, just kind of felt, you know, like, okay, this is going pretty good. This is going pretty good. A few people get knocked out here and there. I think I knocked Nick out and Gareb, which shows, yeah, I'm doing really well in the industry now. We get down to one table of people and we keep playing. And it gets down to like 3 of us and then 2 of us. And the final hand, it goes all in. And I had a lucky draw and ended up winning the tournament.
Oh, how awesome is that?
Yeah. And I ended up going and buying 2 Jim Lee art pages with the money I won from it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I got a page from Hush and a page from Forever Tomorrow. So those are, yeah. But so Nick and I kind of met through that and then ran into each other at conventions. And then San Diego Con, a few months later, Jim Lee was having a big poker tournament. I walk into that because now I'm in the scene now because I've won one. So I'm getting invited. And I walk in, the first thing Nick does, he stands up and goes, $50, whoever takes out Wickline.
Oh, that sounds totally like a Nick thing.
Yeah, he put a bounty on my head. And yeah, I didn't last that long in that tournament, but I went out. I lasted longer than Nick. So, and he and I just became friends after that. And then when I started working for Bleeding Cool, they had a really good relationship between Dynamite and Bleeding Cool. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got assigned to dealing with Dynamite and doing stories involving them. So Nick and I were talking all the time. And then when I left Bleeding Cool, I thought, well, I'm going to do something different. I was actually going to go into, you know, try to do some sales with my brother's company. And Nick's like, no, we're not letting that happen. So I just started getting stuff with Nick. You know, we put out some novels together through Dynamite Books. and now I'm doing, stuff with the experience, doing karma, stuff like that. So, but yeah, it all comes from a really good poker game.
That's amazing. I mean, I had kind of known Nick before, but Comics Pro, the last Comics Pro that happened before COVID, he was the keynote speaker. And I saw the way his speech was kind of like, this dude's a renegade and I like him. So I like almost cornered him after he was done with his speech and just said, how can we work together? And then we ended up at the same like hangout bar after that was all done with Dinesh Shamdasani and a bunch of other retailers. And finally actually got to know him, beyond just like his public persona. I was like, oh, and this guy's a smart business person. I like him.
He's smart, but the thing about Nick that a lot of people don't know is he's got this big heart. If you're a friend or he is going to bend over backwards to try to help you because it's just his nature. He's, I've seen creators who've hit hard times and Nick is the first one to step up. He's involved with the Hero Initiative. He's involved with, I think his Pam runs, is it called Whiskers? It's a cat charity. Yeah. So, I mean,
more than just like they raise money to do it. Like she is very active at going out and rescuing cats that are just like abandoned cats.
Yeah. Yeah. And Nick is just, like I said, he's just a big sweetheart. He really is. And a lot of times he'll call me up and it's like, we're just talking about the latest episode of The Flash. It's not work. It's not anything else. He loves The Flash, the character. So
I did not know this.
Oh yeah. Yep. That's his favorite character. He collects art. And if it's a Flash page, you got a good chance that he's going to buy it.
Yeah. I've never ever seen a Flash page up on his show. And now I understand why.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Nick is a great guy. And he's the one that came to me and said, it's kind of funny. He came to me and said, Matt Hawkins has been telling me about Sunstone. And he says, I really should do a romantic slice of life comic because they do really well for him. Well, Matt's a good friend of mine. We actually play D&D together. I'm currently DMing the group that Matt's in. So next time I see Matt, I got to go, by the way, thank you. Because yeah. But yeah, so Nick came to me and said, do you have any ideas? And I said, well, yeah, I could come up with something. And that's where Karma came from.
That's amazing. It's so neat how this industry is so attached, just like by little threads of who knows who and what they're doing together, whether it's professionally or they're just friends outside of the industry. Yeah.
Well, there's it's a quote I always attribute to Frank Miller. I don't know if it's actually his or if he was quoting somebody else, but he says to get work in this to get work in the industry, you need to, No, I'm messing up the quote now, but it's basically you need a good personality, ability to make your deadlines, and talent in the comic industry. Yeah, no. He said, but to get work, you need two of them.
Oh, okay.
So you don't necessarily have to have talent if you can hit your deadlines and you have a good personality. But if you hit your deadlines and you got amazing talent, you can be a jerk.
I don't know very many actual jerks in the industry. I don't think they stick around very long.
I'm just going to be quiet over here on that one.
Okay, let's go work through somewhere positive with this. You've worked with lots of people on lots of different projects. Do you have a dream project or person that you wish you could work with?
I would love to work with Jim Lee because I am a huge fan of his art. Like I said, I went out immediately and bought pages of his when I had the extra money from the poker game. Michael Golden is another guy who I've actually gotten to be good friends with. I met him at conventions through Tone Rodriguez, who's a really good friend of mine, and just have had some amazing conversations with Michael. Never about comics, we've had conversations about the idea of mole in Mexican food, because the idea of chocolate on spicy food doesn't sit well with me at all. We've discussed Jimi Hendrix's music while watching footage from Woodstock. I mean, I just had these great conversations with Michael and would love to do something with him. So those are probably the first two on my list. Just, Bernie Wrightson was the third, because Bernie was super sweet and I got a chance to know him pretty well, but I never got a chance to work with him. So it's a lot of the old school artists and stuff, that I grew up with, that I'm honored to know.
Mhm.
But I had wanted to. Shadowhawk was a character I always wanted to work on and got a chance to, which was amazing. And getting to work with Jim Valentino, who is just another awesome guy. But we got when we put it out, we had covers by Eric Larson and Will Spertaccio, and then Jim did a cover, and it's like, well, that's like the majority of the founders of Image, and I've worked with over on with Top Cow, kind of working with Mark Silvestri, so it's like, this is pretty awesome.
I remember the first time I met Mark at San Diego Comic-Con, and I didn't have any kind of idea that he was Wookiee tall.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, really tall.
Yeah, I'm 6'6", so he's a little taller than me, but yeah.
I guess I just haven't stood next to you before. It's like when you give someone a hug and you're hugging the middle of their chest, it's kind of like, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm a tall girl. So.
When I first got into comics, when I did my first convention, I met James Hudnall. And James, who passed away a few years ago now, but he was a writer. He and I had a lot in common. We're both really big guys. He was probably 2 inches taller than me.
Mm-hmm.
And we both have the same background. We both came out of computer programming, the same language, the whole thing. But I stood there talking to him at this convention, and my mother had shown up to support us and walked down this hall or the aisle and looked up to see me talking to Hudnall. She said, and she tells me afterwards, she goes, "I have never seen you looking up at anybody."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was kind of weird. It's like, yeah, But yeah, so there were some really big guys. Silvestri, Hudnall, Mike Richardson over at Dark Horse is super tall.
Yep.
So and of course Jim Shooter is another one. There's some really tall people in this industry. So it seems like we should have a basketball game or something.
That would be a fun thing to put together. Just have I guess you could only we don't have enough probably to do anything but 3-on-3. Were you a sports person at all when you were growing up?
I played a little bit. I played some baseball in high school. I didn't play basketball because I went to high school with this kid named Scott Williams, and Scott went on to win the CIF championship, and then to North Carolina, and then the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, wow.
And got a couple rings with Jordan. So I was just a short guy in high school because he's 7 feet tall.
That's amazing.
So I was like, yeah, no, I'm just a short guy here. I'm not playing basketball. Mm-hmm. I'll be over with the theater kids. Thanks.
All right. A weird alternate world in which you could have been something else. Like, were you ever on a different path other than your IT? Was there another path that you had dreamt about as a kid?
I wanted to be an actor, and I've done some theater. I got to play a dead body on Dexter once. That's about as close as I got. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, you are in California. You could totally go do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, Tone Rodriguez was doing some art for them. And in the second season, there's the Dark Defender gets introduced in Dexter, mm-hmm. and that's Tone's work. Well, I was over at Tone's house one night. He and I used to do conventions together. We would drive like from here to Dallas, do the convention, then drive straight back. So we'd have these windows of, where we spend way too much time together. And he and I have that personality where we become very sarcastic and just rip on each other. Well, mm-hmm. I had left something in his bag, in his art bag, because when we were cleaning up the table at the end of the con, I just drew some stuff in his bag, and so I had to go pick it up like 2 days after the show. And we're still very acerbic to each other. And I get over there, and he and I are just ripping on each other. And some guy sitting there watching, turns out he was one of the writers on Dexter, and thought these two are going to kill each other, and I need to put that in the show. So they in the episode where they introduced the Dark Defender, there's this subplot of a comic writer that gets killed by an artist, and he dies in a comic shop. Well, they decided once it got approved, they thought, well, let's just reach out to the two guys that you based this off of. So I got to come in and play this dead Denny Foster. It was actually on the call sheet. And I got to be dead inside a comic shop. And Tone got to play my murderer. And, so I got to hang out in, we filmed it in Long Beach in this empty, it was actually a hat shop that was empty. So they turned it into a comic shop. And the guy directing it was the same guy who played the kid in the original Christine movie.
Oh, wow.
The main character in Christine. He's now a big director. He does television directing. So he was the director, and I got just to play dead and on the floor in a comic shop for a few hours.
So do you have an IMDb page that just says dead artist, dead writer?
I do have an IMDb page, and I am listed in there. And I ended up, the shirt I wore was my own shirt. And they just covered it in blood. So afterwards, I took it off and I put it away somewhere. Well, a couple of years later, I'm like, I should do something with that. So I gave it to the Hero Initiative, and they auctioned it off to raise money. So it was like,
what a perfect thing to use it for.
But that was one of two things. The other thing I have is the watch from Dexter that I wore, and I still have it. Doesn't work anymore, but so if you ever see the episode, you see my head, my shirt, and my watch is very prominent. So I keep that on my desk as a reminder.
Oh, that's way cool. And JD's so good about finding links to everything we're talking about. So he's got your IMDb page up already in the comments. So if you guys want to look and see all about the cool things that Dan has done, you've got links now.
Cool. Yeah, he's all over the place with those links, isn't he?
Fast. Lightning fast.
Yeah. He just sleeps through my shows.
Well, you're okay. So I will be very upfront. I find your voice to be so soothing that if I'm having a crap day, I put on your show. It's just like my mind can just like, my favorite one to put on is about the Eternals, because you explain everything about the Eternals, and I still don't understand the Eternals, but you've done the best job I've ever heard of trying to explain where they came from and what Kirby was doing, and it's brilliant. But also, your voice is very soothing.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
We call it the dulcet tones of Dan McLean.
I just think I sound like a giraffe in heat, which is hilarious because giraffes make no sounds.
No, I think you could make a really great living as either a voiceover person or one of those people that like reads like the voice version of books. You could be so good at it. But I don't want you to stop writing, so don't do that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Tell everybody when your shows run and how they can reach out to you if they want to talk to you on social media.
Okay. The Dan Wickline show runs this time slot on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then I'm also on In Stores this week on Tuesday nights with Kyle, and we talk about all the latest comics. Usually we just kind of pick on each other through the whole show and just mention some titles while we're doing it. And then on social media, it's pretty much my name most places. On Facebook and Twitter, it's Dan Wickline. I think on Instagram, it's actually Dan Wick 70 because I didn't get into the naming thing early enough. But so you can follow me on any of those. I do have my own webpage with a little out of date. I'm probably going to change that soon at danwickline.com so that it directs everybody to all the social media stuff, because I just don't have time to update that webpage anymore.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. We've run out of time.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate
The
it.
hour would be hard to fill, but I knew that it wouldn't be a problem because I had so many cool things I wanted to ask you. So,
Well, thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun. It was very nice to get a chance to chat with you because we're always like, oh, Jen's up next, and I'm, yeah. So it's nice to actually get a chance to talk.
it was lovely. All right, everybody, don't go anywhere because on The Experience, we've got cool stuff coming up next. Make sure you set your reminders for all of Dan's awesome shows starting tomorrow. And then you've got Wednesday and Thursday also. And stay tuned for more goodies. We'll see y'all later.
Good night, everyone.